Hi, Deborah.
Hello, how are you?
Hi. I'm good. I'm tired, but excited to talk to you today.
I'm super excited. No, I mean the lead to me is always one of those conferences where I feel like I'm like it's a very kind of calm conference. It's like kind of the end of the season. And so it's like your last chance to kind of really verify a lot of what you're thinking about. And it did just that. It did not disappoint.
Yeah, I feel the same way. And in fact, there was like two things that stood out for me, which was community and connection. And it was not just what brands are doing or what retailers should do, but it was really about the how. Like, how are they using technology? How are they getting closer to the customer? How are they dealing with tariffs?
Yeah, tariffs came up quite a bit. And
Yeah.
there's a bit of a it was interesting because it was the morning I was speaking right the night before. It looked like we might have a bit of a pause, which was a short one. And
Hmm.
everyone's like, oh, it's over. And I'm like, well, I think that because supply chains, and this goes back to, right, the supply chain is so long that, right, we are, hopefully in the middle of some of these challenges that a lot of the brands and retailers are facing. But I think they're talking together in different ways, really helping each other with, kind of how they've approached it. And then even, right, we have these ideas for you in terms of things we thought about, but weren't applicable to us.
Yeah. Now, we kicked off the lead, really and truly, on Tuesday night with a fantastic dinner that I think we had like walk-ins as well. Did we have like 40 people? I think so. We had definitely had three tables and we were just adding chairs. So I'd love to get your take on the dinner and then I'll give my little snippet.
Perfect. So I think that, right, kind of kicking it off with, right, we're in a, kind of comfortable room, right, Chatham House rules, and people really opened up to talk about what's happening. And so literally every person, we were like, this is your homework. So every person said kind of, for 2H25, what was their greatest challenge and greatest opportunity. And it really ran the gamut. I mean, we had, kind of large retailers and brands. We had, people who are in stealth and starting next month. So everything in between. And I think if we take a big step back, some of the greatest opportunities people feel much more kind of back of house in some ways, but certainly a lot around operations and how can they, kind of find the pennies in the cushion to fund, right, more martech, right, there, this opportunity. And I think this challenge to kind of find their customer between online and offline and also connect that. And then clienteling, right? This idea of, that kind of to me takes like loyalty, personalization, and special events, and really kind of puts a wrapper around it. And we actually heard a lot. It's funny, we heard a lot about that at the dinner and then over the next 2 days. And it's not something I've heard in quite some time. So I think that retailers are kind of looking inwards right now. Thirdly, I think this idea of really, yeah, we could call it demand forecasting, but how, and inventory allocation, but where are the products coming into, and then how are they distributing it to the store? Oh, and then actually for like space optimization, that,
Hmm.
right, like where is a product going in the store? There's a lot around like the physical aspect of, kind of retail. And right, we also heard from a lot of brands who've previously only been D2C going into physical as well. And then I think that the fifth key topic was really trying to understand, right, 25 is pretty much all right, product is ordered,
Hmm.
flowing. But what does 26, right? Where's the consumer going to be? And, there's talk around, some of the changes in tourism, right? More domestic tourism, which can be a really good thing.
Yes.
Right? Do those consumers want different things? And I think lastly, this idea, right? I can't believe we've gotten this long without talking about AI, but
You know.
this idea of, who owns it in the organization? Are we ahead? Are we behind? And what should we do today, right, to kind of impact 25? So that's a very brief summary of, I think, everything that kind of, and then some that was talked about at the dinner. But I mean, we were so fortunate, right? People really enjoy being in the room, right? They stayed, right, quite a bit beyond dinner to have a lot of conversations, which I know you were a part
Yeah.
of.
Yeah, they did. And I think the one thing just to note is that we didn't just have one type of function in the room. We really had a lot of people from a lot of different cross-functional teams. And one of the things that came up within the group, and this is something that, I talk about a lot, is that, we're still such siloed organizations. And how do we break down those silos? We get these different teams in the room to talk about technology, to talk about go-to-market, supply chain, and of course the customer experience. So that's kind of what I saw. And then of course, applied innovation and all these amazing things happening in AI and how that's going to really impact that supply chain and the go-to-market process to get the right product to the right customer at the right time.
I mean, that's been the holy grail since I started in this
Yeah.
business. And I think, and on the same, right, getting the right product to the right customer at the right time, but also, right, instead of having them order like a small, medium, large, how do we also kind of really get the right product to them, right, the one that will fit them, the color that they like? And that, I think, is also this holy grail of retail.
So let's talk about day one. So day one, what stood out for me was definitely the keynote with Printemps, and I actually ended my time in New York by visiting the store, which I'll touch on in a bit. But what I loved that I think Marie was trying to get out of the duo on stage was that tech is the invisible tool that allows the staff to connect with the customer, and that there was no digital, there's no e-com. So the digital strategy is purely to get that customer in the store, and it was about joy.
Yeah.
I just loved it.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to spend some time with the owner of the building and with all of the retail and the gym and whatnot that's in the building. And so looking at all of it together, and how La Printemps was selected to be in that location, right? It's, first of all, it's the only one in, it's the only
Yeah.
US, the only one in New York. And so I think that this, and right, you step into almost this kind of adult Disney World, if you will. It's just like, because nobody's trying to sell you anything, right? And I'm like, when was the last time that happened when we went into retail? And then like our tour guides, they had talked about, right, like, even if you just want to come in and spend the whole day, right, having kind of a cup of coffee, we welcome that, right? This idea, it's a very welcoming space.
Yeah.
And the fact that you have product right from $35 to multiples of that, it's a really interesting. And so I think that if we take that and kind of think about what that means, I mean, I think that really did set the tone for day one. I think you're right.
It did. I mean, there was a lot of talk about stores and the customer journey, which I really appreciated coming from that merchant space and talking to a lot of market leaders about how are we creating the relevant product, but also, keeping that customer delighted and interested. So Macy's talked about private brand strategy, customer value, great experiences. And then Sheena, Kiera, David, and Simeon on stage talked about trade wars and diversifying supply chain and tariffs and raising prices. So I think it was really interesting where we were going with the conversation that day. What about you? What stood out for you?
I mean, I would say it was a lot of the side conversations that I had, right? Because right, when you know each other, you can have a different, right? You can either kind of play on what you just saw on stage, or,
Mhm.
you know, we talked to a lot of brands who are really thinking about how to grow, and many have seen slower growth in 25, but still growth. And so there's that, you know, we're in control of our own destiny. What can we do? And so I heard a lot more about like pop-up stores, and right,
Mm.
it was that, to me, was really interesting, which was this, yes, it's been more challenging, more dynamic than we had expected, but we still think there's a huge opportunity. So how do we approach that in a different way? And so kind of taking some of the learnings, I will say I found that some of the greatest learnings were from chief customer officers who were on stage, right? Because they're thinking about, really connecting the brand or the space back to the customer and everything in between. And so I'll go to kind of day two when we heard from Kate Spade, and just this real, right. I think done unbelievably well recently. Not only there was a big focus on product, right? Like,
Mhm.
and it was almost, I felt like I got kind of like behind the curtain, which was, the bag that we thought would perform the best did. But when you look at it, it looks really boring. And so that's not what's going to bring people in. So you have to have kind of more dynamic merchandise. And that's not necessarily what's going to sell. But, having that real understanding of that, it was or you almost think of it as like algorithmic merchandising, and it's working, right? So that was a very, right, this kind of real look at how things are working right now, which may have been different than in the past.
Yeah.
But I thought it was a very exciting presentation, and, kind of left me wanting more, actually.
Now you were on stage day two. I caught it. Maybe give us a little snapshot of what you talked to the audience about.
Yeah. So we kicked off day two, and the, once again, this is in the middle of the pause of the tariffs, or, kind of the pause. And I'll say that, so we decided, instead of kind of giving tariff strategies and whatnot, was thinking about where we are from a macro perspective and what we're seeing change. And so we are definitely seeing changes in the way the consumer shopping, right? They are visiting more retailers, spending less time in each, right? They're looking for deals. They're
Hmm.
also, right, like, huge amount of self-control, right? They're shopping more at the drugstores, right? Where, the size of your basket, there's only so much that you can buy. And then, right, if we think about the, kind of where we are with the product that we have, how do you look into the back half of the year and think about it from an operations perspective, and what can you do today to kind of impact tomorrow? And we really think this idea of putting the employee in the center, right, talk about
Yeah.
customer centricity. I really think the more employee centricity that we have, I think that we're, there's a huge opportunity. And I know you had an amazing conversation with Walmart. Maybe you can share
I
some.
did. Yeah, so I was moderating the day two keynote with Jen Jackson, the SVP of private brand for fashion private brands for Walmart. And she even showed a video, and it was so interesting to see the before and the after of what not only the shop floor looked like, but their strategy in some of their private brands, how it translated online and offline. So there's this real connection from a marketing to a merchandising execution perspective, which that's where I like to say, we are breaking down those silos because there is this connection of strategy to storytelling. It was amazing to sit down with her, and she was also wearing some of the Walmart fashion, so that was really great to see. And I think a lot of the folks in the audience were trying to get online and buy what she was wearing, which was, I thought, pretty fabulous.
I've always thought that, well, first of all, they've done such an amazing job of integrating tech into everything that they do. And they've also, I mean, the data shows it, right? They've started to have a much broader range of consumers, right? With some of the fastest growth in over 100,000 household income, because the product is great. They're doing an amazing job of storytelling. And I think this whole kind of concept of, shelf to consumer, they're really leaning very hard into the tech, but it almost is like what you said with La Printemps. It's invisible tech. And so it's kind of, you're getting a great deal with a great product and served in almost like a clienteling kind of way to you. So I think that, that was such an amazing conversation, because once again, it was that same feeling of, oh, I get a look
Yeah.
inside, and, how are they changing at the speed they are?
Yeah, and it was, it is about connecting that, or let's say balancing the tech and the touch, and what does that balancing look like? I actually sat down with Jen before and after, and we talked about how they're overhauling, their product creation strategy. Something I love to talk about is materials for strategy and product development, and what does that mean for things like speed or creating better product with better materials at a better price. So it's really great to see that Walmart is doing these things that could really change the way the industry creates product, which of course I mean, it is a game changer for a lot of brands.
Yeah, it's interesting you said that. So I worked on a project back in 2018. It's funny how retail is small. So we were looking at actually in 2018 how to bring production back to the US. And it was more challenging than I think we had thought, right? We went in very, with this client, we can do this. This is exciting. And, then you start to look at, kind of from a CapEx perspective and whatnot. But there was a mill that we had looked at in purchasing for our client down in Texas. And so this person I actually just like bumped into, they bought that mill, and they were talking about what that means in terms of, right, clean denim, and, their approach to new product. And so there was a lot that was happening on the merchandising and, kind of product creation side that I hadn't expected to hear. And it goes back to, I think, why the lead is such a special conference is you get to hear all these things and really literally bump into people you hadn't expected to talk to. And so I found that I learned a lot more than I expected. I got to see a lot more people than I thought. And I think, right, it really started with our dinner, right? Because
It did.
it was so much richer. And it was just one of these amazing opportunities for us all to spend time together to think about where we are in the state of the industry and like what each of us can do to have an impact. And I think that it was such an honor to co-host that with you. It was just, I can't wait till next year.
Oh, this is going to be a yearly event for sure. Everyone get in touch with us. Let's see if we can get you in. To close off the day, day two, I actually was on stage during the DTC symposium, and I interviewed two brands that are building wholesale strategies for long-term profitable growth. And what was so interesting is that a lot of the things that we were talking about on stage, we had brands raising their hand. You know, I also had a book signing that day on the wholesale. So it was a really exciting way to end the lead for me.
I think they do such a great job of, last year I was part of their AI summit at the end of the conference. I think they always do a great job of kind of looking ahead.
Yeah.
And right, we are seeing a lot of change, especially in DTC, because like the customer acquisition cost is just so high right
Mhm.
now. And so there is this, and I got to talk about my favorite topic, which is live streaming with several of these brands. And so I was like, this is, thank you, Noah, right? Because
Yeah.
it's such an amazing way to acquire customers and to drive, kind of brand education and
Yeah.
whatnot. And so I think it was great, but I think that you had such an amazing place at this conference, and whether it was with Walmart or some of these D2C brands, I mean, it was really amazing to see you. And I think it was great for all of us to have this opportunity.
I agree. Thank you so much, Deborah. And more to come on, DTC strategies and of course, what's up with the lead next, right?
Exactly. Take care. Have a great weekend.